I mean, you're comparing me being the rapping CPA, taking accounting and rapping about it, to you turning cartoons into...
accounting concepts into cartoons. I think it's equally as challenging to take a subject matter like accounting and flip-flop it and make it creative. And, I mean, how many raps can you come up with, related to individual taxation?
That's a concern I've always had, is am I going to at some point just run out of juice? I've always worried if I'm going to run out of creative energy.
The Internal Revenue Code's robust, I mean, there's
always an update.
There's a lot. There's always an update. That's exactly right.
So what inspired you to do cartoons as your thing? Why was that the move?
Why cartoons? I struggled a lot in school. I think growing up, it was really tough for me to process information, a big block of text, retaining it and turning it into something that was digestible. The CPA exam, as you know, is about as complex of a subject matter as you could get when it comes to professional licensing in the business world. I mean, I ultimately wanted to create something that was digestible, easy to understand. And I think the CPA exam is really comprehensive and you just can't memorize your way through it. So understanding the logic and the intuition behind the material was something I felt was needed to pass these exams. So hence cartoons, I mean, hence.
When you were passing the CPA exam, did you self-study or what did you do?
No, I self-studied. I studied with Becker, cool. As a lot of CPA candidates do. I think Becker's very thorough. I think they do a really good job at covering everything in the AICPA blueprint. For me personally, I struggled to interpret a lot of the information. I think breaking it down into a format that allowed me to understand it was tough. So, when I started teaching the material, I saw it really start to stick with students. I mean, really stick. You put together a mental map, a step 1 through step 4 for some of the more challenging concepts, and it takes them back to a certain visual that maybe they saw when they were learning the material. In the same way that if you were to hang up a picture on your wall and takes you back to a time you were in Mexico, I mean, you're reliving that moment when you see that photo. So ultimately, I think that's kind of how the reason behind the cartoons.
Sure. I think that's why there's an opportunity for accounting rap songs or accounting music.
Hey, cheers to that.
That's a way to memorize. I'm thinking
100%.
I still know that.
It doesn't matter how it is, man. I mean, I think if there's something creative and catchy that allows it to stick, especially in the pressure environment of the Prometric Center and a high stakes exam with your career on the line, I mean, if it's a rap, it's a rap.
Yeah. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. Yeah, everybody out there who's heard that before, everybody knows that Schoolhouse Rock. So
totally.
And it works. And I think that's why they use all the acronyms a lot, right?
Yeah, the mnemonics. Yeah,
mnemonics
100%.
are really helpful.
Yeah.
All those just different techniques, and you're right. I mean, nobody tapped into being like, let's add some more visual aids. And
how do children learn, right? I mean, children remember songs. Old MacDonald and. What's the other one?
Even your ABCs. You sing your ABCs.
Totally, exactly.
How many people still can't even do their ABCs?
How do you remember A through Z?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you sing it.
Yeah.
I still sing it.
Yeah, you still sing it. I mean, that's just how. I mean, it's just so ingrained.
Dude, that's such a funny thought.
But
I think of that.
This is cool. So yeah, I mean, talking about the CPA exam is one of the things we're going to be discussing today. I know that's the world that you live in. So
I know we could both relate to it.
Yeah. That being said, as I like to say, let's get flowing.
Let's do it.
Fintech Flo.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Fintech Flo. I am your host. For those who are unfamiliar, Drew Carrick, known in the industry by some as the rapping CPA. Petty Cash is the stage name, which I go by. Producer at FloQast Studios, and I got a special guest here with me today.
Hey, what's going on? My name is Joey. I'm the founder of Universal CPA Review. Drew, you're one of my favorite people in the entire industry, so I'm stoked to be here.
Do you remember how we connected initially?
I think I hit you up, maybe.
Perhaps on like an Instagram or something.
It might have been Instagram, yeah. I've seen your stuff since before I even considered entering this space, and I remember just always thinking, there's such few creative content out there that really stuck and stood out. And I remember, your materials. So I think that's sort of what inspired me to reach out.
Yeah.
It's funny how far we come,
Right.
I mean, it started out with Mad Dogs and on Stone Street, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that. I was like, wow, yeah, Stone Street's our annual our meetup spot.
Yeah, no, I think Mad Dogs on Stone Street.
Yeah.
It's kind of the go-to at this point.
That's what we do. You get the margarita,
Yeah.
get some tacos,
House margarita.
You have a weird allergy to.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so many allergies. But yes, peanuts and avocados. I think the one you're thinking of, because it's tough to go to Mexican without getting avocado. So we always have to get it on the side.
So what I like to do during this section of the FinTech 411 is kind of do a little industry breakdown. It's obviously your first time here, but I also start off things with some sort of joke. Normally I'll do like a one-liner, like a knock-knock or whatever, but this one's just going to be a little one-line joke.
Cool. I'm ready.
So studying for the CPA exam is a lot like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, blindfolded, underwater, while your friends are all out having fun. And you can relate. Like everybody who's taken the CPA exam knows what it's like to be like, I got to buckle down and just sit inside.
It's so funny. Unless you're studying for the CPA exam, the sick, twisted part of all of it is nobody knows what you're going through except you and the select few people in this world who are also studying for the CPA exam. So it's kind of this sick, twisted joke that, it's kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, 100%. And that kind of brings you to where do you eventually take that with your career, right? And a lot of times that is Big Four, public accounting, which is never ceases to make its way into the accounting news. So this was a piece from the Wall Street Journal as our first article here. The accounting giant PwC plans to lay off 1,800 employees, 2.5% of its U.S. unit. And that was cited by anonymous sources, which I thought was just like an interesting thing. I'm like, how do you get anonymous sources citing that? But kind of reminds me of Going Concern, which would always just receive anonymous tips about like what's happening inside your company. But the layoffs would be the first for PwC's U.S. unit since 2009, which is impressive. And they're slated to commence in October. What's interesting is, of course, all the other Big Four had participated in layoffs over the last decade. For example, KPMG laid off 5% of its staff in 2023. So this is kind of the last of the big dogs to take that hit.
Yeah, no, it makes you wonder if they're kind of following a trend or a theme. I think that, we naturally like to think that layoffs are due to economic factors and impacts, but I think that there's just sort of this narrative now with AI and, internally developed technologies that are constantly being built, products that are being built that are making companies more efficient. So it's hard to pinpoint the why behind a lot of it. There's talent being outsourced overseas, but I think at the end of the day, it's an opportunity that they at least see is advantageous to growth and increasing margins.
Yeah, I mean, I think in 2009 you obviously have the housing market crash and you had the recession, so it made sense that there was just a layoff due to bad economic times. Then you had this weird period with the post-COVID era of, companies, like I said, the business just world stopped. And if the businesses are stopping, then the auditing and all the rest of it's kind of stopping too. Though there was, of course, high demand for accounts with PPP and all the loans that were happening during that COVID period and stimulus package. But I do think, like you said, it is honing in on innovations that are kind of moving the profession forward, moving industries forward, specifically AI and technology, and they're sort of refining what it is that they're going to be focused on. So according to the U.S. executive leader, Paul Griggs, he said, ultimately, we are positioning our firm for the future, creating capacity to invest in anticipating and reacting to market opportunities of today and tomorrow.
It's pretty nebulous, it's kind of a gray area. I think that, at the end of the day, decision makers are going to make the best decisions they can with information they have, and they're going to report it in a way that sounds good. It's like I said, it's hard to pinpoint why. I think with information like that, I think what we know is that technology is booming. Companies are becoming more efficient, and I think that couple that with a talent crisis, a pipeline crisis in the world of accounting. It becomes even more challenging to navigate, and especially when you're trying to attract talent to choose accounting versus other business disciplines. But I do think that at the end of the day, the CPA license is still the backbone of a lot of opportunities, and especially at an early stage in professionals' careers, there's only so much you can have walking into the labor force.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes how much private equity involvement now, which is starting to touch the accounting realm, impacts that, because it's all about making things a little bit more lean. And just because you're not backed by PE, or whether you are, doesn't isolate you from the business philosophies of what a PE would instill. A lot of the times, of course, being how do we consolidate overhead, and how do we make it a more lean operation. And I do think actually this is the smart move from it making sense. I mean, it's not a layoff from like, this is we're going through tough times, we need to lay off. They had previously done, I saw an optional round, I think it was back in 2014 2017 perhaps. They had a round of, it wasn't layoffs, it was sort of like the opportunity to shift your focus,
right?
And again, with the whole notion of adapting, which is something that the profession has notoriously been a little slow at adapting.
Sure.
It is kind of encouraging, at least from like a business philosophy standpoint, to be like, no, we need to be ready to pivot. We need to be ready to do something a little bit different.
Definitely.
And that means, leaning up and focusing on work and aiming to get not just more talent, but the right talent. And it means the next generation of accountants, I think, need to be focusing and looking at what's going to make me the right talent. And that's, of course, being savvy with technology and familiar with AI. So you had found this interesting article from Strata about the talent disrupted in college graduates, underemployment, and the way forward. And I think when it comes to the CPA realm and the profession, like you said, it's going to come down to, are we teaching the right stuff? Are we educating on the future talent to be the right talent that these firms and that these companies are all looking for?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think this article really resonated with me. I've been obsessed with it since it came out. I think it's mind-blowing, the statistics that I'm seeing from higher education and the level of underemployment for college graduates once they do graduate. Over 50% of college graduates are underemployed, which means that they do not have a job out of college in what their field of study. And over 50% of them are underemployed for 10 years after they graduate. And to me, I think that really, right, that's the top of the funnel. That's the top of the pipeline for this pipeline crisis. And I think it starts with acquiring talent and rebranding what it is to be an accountant at this stage in the game. What do you think when you were 18, 19 years old, and that's the moment of truth? Yep. What am I going to study? What did you think of accounting?
I mean, I'll be honest, my first exposure to it was actually probably a lot more positive than I think what the stereotype is.
Okay.
And I think what happened was, over time you get jaded and it doesn't really hold true, right? You get, and look, it was the old, summer Fridays and having these fun events, the internship experience that really kind of brings you in. You see the partners who are just, balling out, buying everybody lunch, and you kind of envy that. And I think somewhere along the line, we lose sight of, I think you kind of get this reality check when you become an associate, where you're like, oh, I don't get to just pick lunch and highlight work papers anymore. Like, there's actually stuff that I have to do.
A lot of responsibility.
And I don't think, honestly, schooling adequately prepares you for the work that you're going to have to do. Like, I came in thinking I was just going to be taking tests, because I enjoyed accounting classes, right? But it's very theoretical, and it's also very, just journal entry based. And you don't actually, I think, get the experience that you need to like actually understand what it is that you're about to get into. Understanding audit theory, understanding tax theory. Tax is probably a little more applicable, but the very theoretical stuff and the not tactical stuff, it was very daunting then when I started working, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't know if I can accumulate 15 years of knowledge to be like as smart as these partners are, and I don't know if I envy the lives of how busy they are, and the stress of being on all these different clients. And so when I came out, I was really set on partner track, and I very quickly saw that light sort of disappear. But I do think that if we can tap back into that excitement that initially was there and be like, no, these people are ballers. Like, there is, like, I don't know if you're familiar with JJ the CPA. He's part of my network, and he made all these like fun videos and stuff too. And he's just the like cigar smoking, blinged out Corvette, middle-aged, own my own tax practice, has the freshest suits. JJ the CPA, and he was like the coolest CPA. And during the COVID boom, he was blowing up on YouTube, making all these videos about how small businesses could utilize the stimulus package in different ways.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was the stuff which it's like, can we see more of that?
Yeah.
I mean, what about you?
No, look, I mean, I go back. I mean, my background is a little less inspiring than that. My dad basically told me, I'll pay for you to go to college, but I get to pick the degree. I mean, I think he was just totally like, he's had it up to, he was over me at that point. But, so, I mean, my dad kind of guided me in that direction, and I'm glad he did, because I think that there's only so much you could do out of school with a college degree and a certain background. And, what the accounting degree does allow you to do is it is a prerequisite to get a license, which means you can legally do something that others cannot. It's highly regulated. I mean, a marketing degree, a management degree, a focus in human resources, no disrespect to those professions, but they don't legally set you apart. It's not a license. It doesn't set you up to obtain a license. And I think that, it's the Hunger Games out there. You walk out of college and you have a survival pack that is the brand of your university, and that's it. And, you have X amount of time to add to that survival pack and get to the top before nobody else does. So I think my point is that when you walk out of college, you only have so many resources backing you. How could you not? You're 23 years old, 22 years old. So I think what I'm trying to say is that walking out with an accounting degree, having that prerequisite to obtain a license, is already a huge step up. It's a huge leg up. So I think that at the end of the day, firms are very interested in, and the AI CPA, I mean, everybody is like, how do we make this cool, right? And I think the reality is so much of the workforce out there it's scary, I mean, it's a scary world out there. And I think that what we should be telling the younger generation is the hard truth, the hard fact that, like, hey, you walk out of school, there's only so much you could do. And I mean, you look at some of the most successful business people in this world, and they know accounting. I mean, they if they're not licensed. So having that background is the backbone of, I mean, it's the grammar of money, and being able to walk out with that background, I think is definitely key.
One of the things I'm really trying to get through to the youth is AI is here to help. Right. And because I think there's sometimes this fear, and this is across the entire generation, of, well, if AI is just going to do it, then why bother? Sure, I can go with any degree and I'm just going to come out and AI is going to take it. One, with accounting, it's not true. But it's also just going to be a shift in the role that accountants have, which I think presents the opportunity personally to make it a more attractive profession, because you're doing cooler stuff because AI is making it possible for you to do cooler stuff. So I view it as a positive thing.
I mean, without a doubt, and to be quite honest, I've never fully understood why that fear existed. I mean, unless large language models can obtain a CPA license, they can't do the work of a CPA, period, end of story. It's regulated by various authoritative bodies, and there's just certain things that require a human being with a license to sign off on. I mean, ChatGPT can't sign your tax return, it can't sign an audit report. Right. And people need to understand that I mean, ChatGPT, yes, can disrupt a lot of industries like marketing. It can disrupt management. It can disrupt anything that requires task-oriented jobs and professions. And while, yes, accounting does have a lot of task-oriented jobs and requirements, it doesn't have a CPA license. A license is different from a certification. A certification means you can do something, and I'm showcasing that with this piece of paper. A license says I can legally do something that you cannot. And to me, that's checkmate, that's the end of the story there.
And the ability to look a layer beyond just what's in front of you, like ChatGPT will be able to do those task-based things, which is good because 100%. Nobody wants to do those task-based things anyway. But what I find to be most fun is when I do something important, and you want to feel like you're important, right? And that's where, how do you make the next generation see the profession as like it is something that's very important? Because important is cool. Like, everybody wants to feel like they have power, they have importance, and it warrants respect and it warrants compensation. And I think that's what accountants would be positioned for.
No, totally. And it accelerates the trajectory of a CPA more than anything. Because to your point, now they are able to do important things, important tasks, because it omits so much of the necessary grunt work that can be just done by an AI language model like ChatGPT or OpenAI. So I think that it enables a lot of accelerated growth for CPAs, and they could start thinking critically and leveraging the license that showcases the business acumen that they now have.
Yeah, I think a lot of this has to do with the notion of just like being able to pivot, being able to adapt. What's the new economy going to look like? What's the new profession going to look like? And it does give a good chance to, I think, rebrand. So kind of pivoting off of that, one thing which is interesting, which is just in the fintech space and just kind of attests to the whole notion of adapting and changing, is the recent news that Apple is leaning into having this new product, and this was reported from the Wall Street Journal, that they are going to be making the AirPods Pro 2 a medical device, essentially turning every pair of the company's top-selling headphones into over-the-counter hearing aids. And it's interesting because audiologists expect it to be the best low-cost option for most Americans who need hearing aids but won't wear them. And it's meant for people with, perceived mild to moderate levels of hearing loss, and those exactly are the people who might otherwise not get a hearing aid because there's a stigma about, having a hearing aid. But it's shocking how many people are, hard of hearing, and there's definitely a stigma to having hearing aids that people are very resistant to.
Yeah, it's a wild amount. It kind of reminds me of the time I first tried contacts when I was like in seventh grade, and all of a sudden I could see the leaves and I could see the basketball hoop, and I was like, oh, that's what that looks like. I think what's exciting for Apple in entering the space, and really exciting for the more traditional hearing aid companies, is that the market does exist. It just doesn't know it fully exists yet. I think I saw something like 28 million people need hearing aids, but only 16% actually use them. Wow. So that's a massive amount of people that are about to find out, hey, I don't hear so well. So I think that was kind of the interesting tidbit I had on that.
I mean, the psychology behind the people who are refusing to wear hearing aids, obviously, you feel like, oh, that's for old people, right? And it's like, no, it's kind of for everybody. How many people have their ears blown out because they listen to their music too loud growing up on their iPod and whatnot? But it's kind of funny. Apple might have caused the problem, right through,
and then they fix it
through and then you fix it.
With a new product.
That's brilliant. That's the best sort of business model, right?
Yeah, vertically integrated.
But what I think is interesting is I've seen a lot of charts lately that have been floating around about how the Apple iPhone sales have, just because Apple recently had their announcement about the iPhone 16. Obviously, hardware is being updated to be more capable for AI purposes. But other than that, it's just, again, nothing groundbreakingly spectacular. Like, there's talk about at some point them having a folding screen. That would be a groundbreaking thing. But they haven't done anything groundbreaking really in what feels like a decade, and people are just not buying the new phones. They're not as hyped. They're excited about the new ones when they roll out, and the iWatch or Apple Watch didn't really take off in the same way that I think they were hoping was going to be like a universal hand. And it did hype up, and then it kind of died back down again. iPads, they're starting to struggle away. What's the use case for it? So you're kind of like really leaning in the MacBooks probably. Yeah. And when it comes to the headphones, it's like, it's kind of cool because they're just trying to get creative on how they can incentivize people to be excited about what Apple's doing. And I don't know, I was thinking, like, when in doubt, try becoming FSA eligible.
It's definitely, I mean, 100%. It does make you wonder about, how this impacts healthcare regulation. If healthcare, insurance coverage specifically, is that going to be covered? It's a tech product technically,
right?
But I do think it's interesting. You bring up hearing aids being uncool. I mean, same argument can be made about glasses. Glasses definitely were definitely uncool to me when I was young. But now you see everybody wearing Warby Parker and some of the more hip glasses out there. It's almost like people are wearing them without prescriptions.
Right.
So maybe hearing aids are about to become cool.
Think about how many people you see that are just rocking AirPods all day. It's a statement, sure. Even if it's just in one ear, and you obviously have the ability now to make it enhance the things you're hearing around you. I make it fashionable, and it becomes cool.
It's one of those underappreciated things where you're like, oh, you think you hear everything, you think you're retaining information, but it makes you wonder how much more efficient, how much more aware and present you actually are if you do hear a certain amount of percentage more than you're currently hearing.
It makes me also think about, relating it back to accounting, is when it comes to accessories and items like that, there's a way to make them cool because it's visual, it's corporeal, you can feel it, you can physically see it. It's like that B2C world. Obviously B2B is a challenge when it comes to making things cool. And when it comes to services, typically the accounting profession, it's like you said, it's a service-based industry. How do you show that coolness, right? And because it's not fashion, that's, I think, the biggest challenge. And if somebody can crack that code.
Yeah. I think making accounting cool, I don't know, like I always lean towards, if everybody's trying to do something, try to do something different. Like what is that thing that is different when it comes to accounting? What made finance cool? What made marketing cool? What made technology, working for startups cool? I don't know what that is and how you bring it back to accounting, because accounting is such a it's so specific within the business world. It is very in the weeds in many cases, but I think at the end of the day, you circle back to the value of the license. I think you could spin your wheels all day saying, this license is cool. You could do this in audit. You could do this in tax. I just don't know that that's going to work. I wonder if you just do what my dad did and scare me. I think you just say like, hey man, you're not going to get a job. Period, end of story.
Fear works.
I don't know. I think it might work.
Fear does work often.
Fear works.
I do wonder if there's a kind of catch-22, because the profession is one that typically veers away from being edgy, right? There's a more risk-averse nature
For sure.
to it. Whereas other, I'm thinking of the visuals that you see when you see like finance bros, like out partying, and it's
a great brand.
And again, because they're out like making money for you,
Yes.
so like they ball out then. And accounting is always seen as, of course, the the back office where we're maintaining the books, and especially if you're signing off on financial statements and taxes, that's kind of viewed as like, no, you need to be square, you need to be compliant. So I'm almost wondering if there's a reverse psychology of a way to lean into the fact that you do have to be a little more straight edge, because who do you want? At the end of the day, there's always going to be somebody that says one way or the other, and I think having a good personality is important. And I think there's a lot of really exciting personalities in the accounting space that just don't get featured and recognized. But at the same time, who if you pick out two people, which is the guy who you want doing your tax
Absolutely,
returns
you're
or
gonna win
who doing your audit,
Yeah.
And I think that's why you need the balance of both. And I think Mike Whitmire, the CEO, and I talked about how you needed like one of each of those people. You need somebody who's like the head down, this guy's going to make sure everything's done by the book, proper, super clean, like there's going to be no holes, no gaps. And the other one who's the more sales type of person, which is the personality of it and having that balance.
What's the name of Warren Buffett's right-hand man? Is it Munger?
Charlie Munger.
Charlie Munger.
Yeah, he had passed away last year, yeah.
Yeah. Charlie Munger, that's kind of the narrative behind this kind of unspoken truth of Warren Buffett's success, is that Charlie Munger was sort of that back office guy that kind of held him in check. But yeah, no, I think that it's, I think it's a really tough code to crack. I think finance did a good job with branding it, models and bottles and a lot of money, and that exciting stuff is what gets the younger generation excited. I don't know that, I wonder if going too hard into that is too conspicuous with accounting.
Sure.
I don't know that that's really the move.
I would say what we can do is showcase all of the opportunities and the potential
100%.
things that you can do with because the accountant is going to be more qualified. They're going to be a better finance bro in doing their job.
At the end of the day, it's tell these kids what the license is. It is your background. Stick to the truth, because it does have high value. This is a great product in the license that you're trying to get people to buy into. Stick to that, stick to the value and really what it enables you to do, as opposed to just trying to copy what has worked in other spaces. They've had to get creative. They've had to make it look cool, because at the end of the day, maybe the value wasn't quite as strong. So that, that's something I definitely believe strongly in.
I blame bowling for soup. 1985.
1985.
Debbie
they just hit the wall.
Yeah, I wanted.
Husband's a CPA.
I wanted to write a song responding to that,
God.
being the
I love
CPA,
that
and it's
song.
like, yeah, Debbie did pretty darn well.
She
you know what?
did.
Debbie's doing all right, because
Yeah.
Debbie could be out on the street
Prozac
somewhere.
a day, husband's a CPA. Let's go.
She's crushing it.
Absolutely.
So this next section I like to do is called Bullish or Bearish.
Okay.
This is a fun little section. It's been a few months since this topic actually has reached the conversation. This is where we just talk about if we're bullish or if we're bearish. And this is from Accounting Today, and it is the AICPA and NASBA proposing an alternative to the 150 hours rule. And this has come up on the podcast several times before. There's speculation over should we do something. There's actually an official proposal, which is out there. And this would offer an alternative to the 150-hour credit. The proposed competency framework would require candidates to meet 7 professional competencies, which I think is interesting: ethical behavior, critical thinking, and professional skepticism, communication, collaboration, teamwork and leadership, self-management and continuous learning, business acumen, and technology mindset. All really good core competencies. And then 3 technical competencies: tax, business and financial reporting, and audit and assurance. So it's kind of making you do a little mini rotation at wherever you work, because this would be verified in the candidate's workplace by licensed CPAs. So, as far as the notion of not having to get the 150 hours and instead getting the work, I'm bullish on that notion.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is. I think I'm obviously bullish. I think that, you ask a CPA candidate to overcome the most challenging hurdle in passing the CPA exam, and now it's, in many cases, students didn't have 150 hours. Now it's like, oh, now you want more. Now I have to go and improve even more by taking a few extra classes and doing that. I think the AI CPAs tried to do things like the Earn and Learn program and make it more affordable to get the extra credits. But I think that this is a great first step in changing the requirements. I think that everybody knows that there's a pipeline crisis, that it's an all hands on deck sort of situation where we need to find a way to fix it. And this is obviously a hurdle. And I think that giving an alternative to obtaining the license is certainly important. But more importantly, recognizing that passing the exam is the biggest hurdle. I mean, it's like you pass these exams and now I can't get licensed because I have to do a bunch of extra stuff.
I had to do an extra class online at LSU because I was 3 credits shy of the New York State requirement, because I didn't take an accounting class during my master's because I had majored in accounting. but in New York, you had to get 36 hours or something as opposed to 33 hours, which is what I had taken. So I had to take 1 extra forensic accounting class.
Where'd you get undergrad?
Mount St. Mary's University in Maryland.
So well, now you could say you're an LSU Tiger.
That's what I do. I got the shirt. No, as soon as I signed up, I was like, oh, it's my alma mater.
Yeah,
I'm like,
so
I'm an LSU.
You watch them on Saturdays.
Yeah, go Tigers.
Yeah,
I got my house in
Tigers.
New Orleans.
Yeah.
So it works out. It works out well for me.
Definitely.
But I think this is good that the AICPA and NASBA are asking for public feedback. So we'll include the link in the description, which is where active other CPAs can respond to be like, I think this is good. Because here's the thing that my concern was with the whole, how do we fix the pipeline by changing the CPA exam? I don't like that because, like you said, there is weight to having these 3 letters after your name. I went ahead and did the MBA. That was like a pride thing. Not to say it's the most difficult thing ever to do, but I didn't just get another 30 credits for the sake of it. I was like, you know what? I graduated college in 3 years. I'm going to use this 4th year to double up and just get the MBA knocked out. So I'll have that, have the CPA. We love having more letters after our names.
Yeah, I mean, it's a license versus a non-license, and I think having the license with the CPA letters next to your name carries weight, obviously. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a huge win so far. It only came out, I think.
Yeah.
I got an email a couple days ago. My jaw dropped. I was warming up some pizza, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. But no, I think it's exciting. I think it definitely is a good first step. I think there's been a lot of conversation, about how to make this more accessible for people to get licensed, and just kind of omitting a lot of the hurdles that might feel unnecessary. As far as CPA evolution goes, I think all of this sort of happened at once. I think when the exposure drafts came out initially for CPA evolution, it was before the pipeline crisis really was amplified and there was a huge spotlight on it. So it's tough timing. I think that the evolution coming out with this, 7 years later, here we are, and this pipeline crisis is worse than we've seen in several decades. So I think the timing was tough. They're obviously not going back now, right. But I think this is a good step in chipping away at fixing it.
I like the idea of focusing on making the professionals who become CPAs better workers, you feel more comfortable when you're good at your job. Everybody wants to feel good, like I'm good at my job.
Yeah.
Gives you a sense of less stress, because if you're going every day and you're fighting, if it's a battle, it's like, I don't know, I think of like a pitcher in baseball that gets out there and they don't got their best stuff that day. They're grinding and battling the entire day to try to just get through their outing. And if you have to show up to work every day, that's how you burn out, right? You're constantly stressed because you don't know the answer. You're having to ask somebody else. But if you can get acclimated quicker, get more comfortable with what it's like working in the different areas, have a broader depth of experience working, again, like I said from my earlier point, learning theoretical is great, but it's actually doing it that's going to provide value. So what's interesting is, of course, you still have to do your 2,000 hours of just general work experience, like utilized hours, but you also need to exemplify these core competencies over the, working underneath the CPA, which it'll be interesting to see how they actually go about testing and evaluating that. But I'm really bullish on the notion of focus on, don't make the exam easier. I don't want that, because I like the fact that it is viewed as a difficult thing.
Yeah.
Let it weed people out, but let that be the primary weed out. Don't make it be the process of getting your letter of notice that you need to take the exam and getting patted down and the whole process to take the exam. Just, can you answer these questions?
To me, the exam is more than sufficient. It is an ample test to help indicate whether or not you are sufficiently prepared to practice as a licensed CPA. Period. End of story. And I think asking students, now that you've passed the most rigorous academic requirement, that now you have to go and obtain more academic requirements, that to me defies logic. But I think that at least, if you've passed the CPA exams, you're not going to not get the work requirements. I mean, you went ahead and got the CPA license and pursued the exam for a reason. At least this makes sense in a certain way.
And you spoke about earlier the underemployment of graduates. This is directly, going to target that. Totally. Is like, you have these colleges that are overselling how much the degrees are worth. Again, I still I love the college experience, but from like, what's the value
is
of
it worth $200,000?
Right.
I mean,
it's definitely inflated.
Not. Yeah, absolutely.
But the idea of, and we floated this around of like, an accounting boot camp where it's like, let's get you the 2 years of getting the theoretical stuff and then jump into, doing the actual stuff that you would be doing.
Yep.
Because that's what's going to best prepare you. And I think that's why we're seeing a shift back towards technical jobs and technical schooling, where people are learning how to be engineers again, or how to be mechanics, plumbers, electricians, all things that are absolutely necessary. AI cannot replace them, and is a very refined technical skill and an expertise. And I think we'll start to see a move of these service-based technical things, because knowing accounting and understanding it is a very highly technical skill that you might as well learn how to do that technical skill beyond just the theory of it. It's not some lofty liberal arts degree. It's 100%. A very hard technical skill.
You're definitely not being hired to think critically about all kinds of stuff. But I mean, it is very technical, and I think that was sort of a struggle for me initially. I was underprepared for a lot of the technicalities that went into an entry-level position. I know a lot of people who can resonate with that. But yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know the answer necessarily, but I do think that, showcasing what it is they're going to be doing, and maybe not what they're going to be doing day one, but where it is they're going to be, what it is they will be doing. For me, it's interacting with people, it's interacting with clients, it's getting out there and getting after it. And I think you first of all need to identify what it is this generation wants. And I think everybody's trying, but I do think it's about taking a step back and simplifying the approach a little bit.
For sure. That brings me on to, we're talking about philosophy here. And I minored in philosophy, if you didn't know that.
I did know that.
That's one of my exciting things.
You're a thoughtful cat.
Majoring, I'm a thought leader, as they say.
I love that.
My accounting was the major, followed it up with the MBA, concentrated that in marketing. You had three options. You could do management, marketing, or finance, I believe. Yeah. I went the marketing route. I was with the MBA, and then I minored in philosophy because I was like, well, I just love hypothesizing. So but again, if I could go back, one thing I regret is not focusing more on the technical stuff, because that would make me a much better critical thinker. It also make me prepared to figure out how to use my critical thinking and problem solving skills and apply it on a more hardcore technical basis. And obviously it's been years now since I've taken the CPA exam, so it's in there. The ability to be that technical, is in there, but I do wish I had really focused on absorbing it. And my recommendation to any student any recent CPA especially, is focus on that work that you're doing early on. Don't just view it as I just got to get through this. It's annoying, because I always just treated every work I had to do like it's homework. And then once I did the homework, I could be done with it and go on to the next chapter. And it's no, you're going to have to do that again. So really retain this and learn the core of it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's also something the CPA exam does quite well with the task-based simulations is they're literally throwing the candidate into a situation where, hey, we're throwing you all these exhibits, you're navigating through them, you're reading this description, and now all of a sudden you have to answer certain scenarios and questions. And it does put you in a situation that could be similar to what you would see in the actual profession. So I think that when you're going about it, to your point, going about it like it's homework or going about it like, hey, I need to just, get through this so that I can get to here and pass the exam. Fine, that's one way to do it. However you pass the exam is fine by me. But I think if you could kind of channel that, this is something that I'm going to be doing. This is my career. I need to be taking it seriously and throw yourself in a situation. I'm playing detective. I'm an auditor here. If somebody's paying me a lot of money to navigate these simulations and this is literally a simulation of a real world experience. I think it's going to help inspire students to, go about it in a way that is at least something that they'll be seeing in the real world.
For sure. So I want to talk about the business philosophy then for you. Obviously we kind of danced around this, and you've talked about your love of cartoons, but you've founded Universal CPA Review, obviously deciding to go into this. So like take us through the thought process of founding this. Like why did you decide to go into this space? Because typically you don't major in accounting to then go teach accounting.
Yeah. Like I was saying earlier, I did struggle a lot in school. I think there was always a natural insecurity for me when it came to education. With my IQ, getting into college or lack thereof, I think was sort of something that really made me question a lot of whether I can or cannot do it. And then studying for the CPA exam educationally was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life by far. I mean, I think I went into it and I was like, whoa, I don't actually know anything about accounting. So, it was this marathon pride swallowing journey for me. And then when I did pass it, I thought I could do anything. I thought, hey, I'm on top of the world right now. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to be the best in the world at it. And I think when I was studying for the exams, I did see a huge problem in the industry, in education in general. I think that coming from a background of somebody who struggled in education, struggled to retain and process information, it really stuck with me that I wanted to do something different, that I wanted to build something that allowed people to make this a little bit more digestible, something where you see a big block of text, you don't have to interpret it yourself. You can understand a narrative and understand the why behind it. And I do think that that's how you do pass these exams. So yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it was about, being a little naive, thinking, hey, I could do anything, but also seeing a real problem that really that really stuck with me. That's something I struggled through.
So at what point were you like, this is the thing though that I'm going to do? Because it's one thing to struggle with and totally. Be like, there should be a better way.
100%.
But like you gotta at some point be like, I'm going to dedicate my life.
Once I passed the exams, I started tutoring out here in New York City, and I was working with students one-on-one, and I thought there's got to be a better way to understand this.
Was this in addition to working?
This was in addition. Yeah, okay. I wanted to make extra money. I had I just passed the exams and I got a new job, and I thought, I wanted to do something else. And this was the first thing that came to mind. It was still very fresh. So I started doing that, and it turned into multiple students, which turned into referrals. And then people started telling me, you are the reason I passed these exams. I was like, well, no way, and, and I started finding unique and creative ways to break down certain concepts that I knew this is a must know for the exam. And over again, I thought, hey, I can really do this. So, I started thinking a little bit more about the industry, started, really understanding what the pain points were of the students, whether it was just me and these select individuals that I was working with, or whether this was a holistic issue. And it turns out it was a major issue. And I think a lot of people who are studying with more traditional review courses were also finding them to be unhelpful. And to me, there's just nothing about this big block of text that helps you retain information unless you understand the intuition behind it. And so that's kind of what led me to taking the plunge and really going all in.
So in the early days, because I feel like there's plenty of CPAs out there who probably had this desire to be like, I want to do something. I want to use this background that I have because, like you said, it's the language of business, it's the grammar of the business, and there is something cool you said about thinking. I just passed the CPA exam, which is one of the most difficult things to do. In the course of any academic career, I can do anything, and if you're a CPA, yeah, you can. And like, you have to know, obviously there's a lot of different options out there. In this case, you kind of went entrepreneurial with it. So what's your initial market research? I feel like that's always a curious thing. A lot of people are hesitant to even make that leap to do something a little outside of what's directly known, because there's no flipping to the back, getting the answer book on opening a business.
I'd love to sit here and tell you I had this in-depth market research. It amazes me the quality of the equity research some of these people out here on Wall Street have access to. I just didn't. I was naive, and that's just the answer. I saw what I saw, and I think that it does require a certain degree of being naive to do something like this, to actually think you can have an attempt to disrupt any industry. And I learned, just like everything else, how hard it actually is once you dive into it. And how comprehensive this exam really was, but it kept fueling my inspiration to build something better. It started with the visual learning approach. It started with notes. It started with the test bank. But then I thought, what if every multiple choice practice question had a side-by-side video explanation? Now we have over 150 hours of video explanations on just our practice questions alone. So I think I had this hunger and desire to build the best product. I think that this industry has a lot of generational companies that have to keep their margins high. They have to, whether they're acquiring each other, whether they are, backed by a big brand, and they have timelines. And, being 26 years old when I started it, I didn't really have a timeline. I thought, hey, if I made some money on this, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it allowed me to really just be patient and build something that I knew would help, because I saw just such a problem and such a struggle that so many students were having.
No, I like the idea of having some of that naivety that you need to have, especially when you come with the risk averse nature of being.
You have to be a little crazy to take the necessary risks that are required.
So that kind of makes me want to laugh a little bit, because I always like to lighten things up with a little bit of laughing. And this is Make Meme Lol. Used to be How Should We Account for Memes? Kind of interchangeable. I don't know if you remember, How Should We Account for Me was one of the websites initially when I was working in public accounting. That's where all the GIFs, they all got started there. Everybody had these, there's just pages and pages of every day, that was getting circulated and shared around. That was like the Big Four account before there was the Big Four account and Instagram account. There was howshouldweaccountforme.com.
Yeah, cool.
Which I always thought was cool. So I got a lot of inspiration from that. This is, of course, from the Big Four. Extroverts equal audit, introverts equal tax. And I think I like to look at these things beyond just, okay, is it funny? Is it true? It's accurate. It's relevant.
It's
right?
That philosophy major.
Right?
And we critically again.
But I'm looking underneath it, because for some reason the introverts, which is associated with tax, because would you agree though that auditors are the extroverts?
Yeah, I worked in tax.
And then
a lot of introverts.
Introverts are a lot of tax. And for whatever reason though, the notion of introverts took over the persona of the entire accounting profession, even though that's just part of them. And even if you look at a lot of the Big Four and a lot of the large firms, advisory services, you need to be a little bit more extroverted.
Yep,
there's definitely introverted people across the board. There's definitely introverted auditors out there who would rather not go deal with the client. I was always one who wanted to go interact and get up and have the conversation with the client whenever I could. But like any profession, there are multiple options of what you can do based on your personality. And I think going back to our conversation about branding of the profession, we can brand that there are options. It's not to say we want to kick out introverts. It's not to say we don't want somebody who can just get their head down and get the work done. But it's that there are multiple options that you can pursue, and there's a role for every personality type.
At the end of the day, this is a business, and I think that it requires just like any business, a skill set that is personal skill sets. I mean, I don't care if you work in tax or audit, you still have to go out there and convince somebody to work with you, to give you their business. So I think if anything, I think it's an advantage to have a great personality and work in tax, because, apparently everyone's an introvert. Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I think that there's sort of a stigma, but it's tough to gauge,
I'm wondering how that tax persona, like how it took over as the predominant character. And I think my opinion is probably that since it's more relatable to the individual, and that's the battle the accounting profession, the corporate accounting profession, I think always is facing, is you don't realize like large corporate entities have an entire accounting department that are not doing taxes typically because they're working on the accounting and the bookkeeping and the financial reporting for these large scale entities. And that's not relatable to most, average Joes or people walking on the street. But what is relatable is every April 15th, we got to have our taxes filed. So I have a tax guy.
What do you think when you think of taxes in general as a tax filer? I mean, it sucks. Yeah. And, so I mean, if you think about that, who's going to be doing the work who's choosing to do this, and so I think that might be where some of the stigma comes from, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, it's a high demand profession, and if you're actually helping people by helping them reduce their liabilities, I would argue.
Yeah, I think what I would love to see is the profession showcasing how do we put more in the spotlight the corporate accounting departments, the controllers of the world.
I mean, look, it is the backbone of business. I don't care what industry. I mean, you need to have your financials buttoned up and understand, the trajectory of future forecasts and projections.
100%. So that brings me to in audit, we called it the concluding cycle. I don't know if you had that in tax.
I might have to sneak it in there.
But so for the concluding cycle here, I just I thought it was interesting to kind of talk through, what the most difficult exams in the U.S. are. Did a little research digging, and obviously it varies piece by piece. Number one is typically considered the medical licensing exam. That makes sense, in my opinion, because I want to make sure that the people who are performing surgeries and actually, doing the brain surgery
are experts.
Yeah. We always joked around and we were like, if we don't hit the filing deadline, like nobody, there's no mortality tied to financial statements.
We're not saving lives here.
Though this is a whole other world, and that's a whole nother episode, a whole nother podcast on when white collar crimes turn into red collar crimes. A little bit, Enron-y in there for sure. Yeah. There's some stuff like that. But number two, the bar exam, which is sort of expected, I guess, as a one-off, perhaps, right? What's interesting is the CPA exam, of course, is 4 parts to it. CPA exam was number 3, and then the CFA came in at number 4, and then there was another 6 after that, but they're kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, there's a lot of people take the CFA exam, so maybe it dilutes some of the data.
Sure, and I think it also what's interesting is a lot of people pass the first part of the CFA. Reduces substantially between the first and the second.
Part 3 apparently is just a beast.
Right.
I mean, my sister took the USMLE. From what I've seen, that's, she was studying 8 months nonstop, 7-8 hours a day.
And that's after 5 years of additional school.
And then you got to go do a residency and have some real problems.
Yeah. So when it comes to the CPA exam, as an instructor, this is what I'll leave us on, is what, do you have like a favorite section?
A favorite section?
Because I got to think about it, right?
Nobody's ever asked me that.
If I was to go ahead and start to tutor for the CPA exam, I'd have to pick a section that I kind of feel like I could relate to. And could talk
I would say each of them, funny enough, I've never actually talked about this, but I would say each of them have they hold a place in my heart that is near and dear. I think the audit section was my kryptonite when taking the exam, so I was determined to find a way to explain the material that honed in on certain nuances that other review courses just are not going to teach you or haven't that I've seen. I think tax is probably the most fun just because I can have some fun with some of the storylines, a certain individual taxpayer, a married filing joint couple, like I get a little creative with that. Maybe if I were to choose regulation and now I guess TCP, and we're having some fun with that.
Wow. See, I would probably have to gear towards. Well, I loved BEC. That was just like I enjoyed that. I thought that was a fun section to do.
Yeah.
Beyond some of like the more managerial accounting stuff, which you kind of you have to do it, but and then audit I actually kind of cakewalked through too. And I came from audit, so that definitely, Reg was definitely on the harder side for me, where I was like, I am just firing blind out here, and I'm relying off of whatever was stored in my memory bank to make sure that this could happen.
Yeah, I think from an instructor standpoint, I try to find. I guess the way I would think of it is which section could I get the most creative with? And funny enough, it would be tax. Because the way we teach a lot of our material is based on storylines and breaking things down and tying material back to one another. To me, that's always been the one that came quickest to mind when thinking creatively.
Yeah. Well, storytelling is magical. That's something we talk about at FloQast Studios all the time.
Yeah, there's nothing like a good story.
But it's been great having you, Joey, here. I was glad we were able to connect here in New York City.
Dude, I'm stoked. We'll do Mad Dog soon.
We'll make it happen.
It's
all right. Anybody wants to meet up with us, that's our spot.
Yeah.
We'll buy you a margarita.
Table with the pitcher. See us there.
All right. That takes us up, wrapping up Fintech Flo. Good having you. Good episode. See everybody next time. Thanks for checking out the Fintech Flo. As a reminder, this episode is available for CPE credit, and you can get that at FloCademy or on the Earmark app. Details are in the description below.